welcome to another Looney Tunes review video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe to follow my journey to review all 1000 classic Looney Tunes shorts, and give this video a like as well. So this is a review for Plop Goes the Weasel, and with me today is the Weasel himself, my good friend Camden Spees. Say hi.
Hi.
Just a few bits of info to get underway. So as mentioned, this is Plop Goes the Weasel, released on the 22nd of August 1953. It's the 687th in the series, and it's directed by Bob McKimson. You can find this beautiful restoration on the Looney Tunes Collector's Choice Volume 1 Blu-ray set. I have a link below to that set. It's not on YouTube, it's under copyright, so in case you haven't seen this one, it's your standard Foghorn Leghorn versus Barnyard Dog short, and in this one, the Barnyard Dog is guarding the chicken coop against the Weasel, but naturally, Foghorn decides to mess with the dog, and as expected later on, the Weasel shows up looking for a feed. So, not much to it, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be too in-depth, does it?
No.
No.
And can I clarify something about this Weasel?
Yep.
This Weasel clearly does not have a name. We see some sources call themselves Willie, which I guess comes from a comic book that is not the same Weasel.
Well, the amount of Weasels we see all throughout Looney Tunes,
yes.
You know, like I recently did the redo for My Green Fedora, which will hopefully be edited and uploaded fairly soon.
Which is also not the same Weasel, unlike internet sources claim.
Yes, so that Weasel, I'm assuming it's a he, has these overalls on, which, fun fact, but they are connected in one way. That Weasel in My Green Fedora, the sounds of the snarls, they actually came from Ted Pierce. And who wrote this cartoon?
Ted Pierce, yes.
So there you are. So there is a connection, but it's not the same Weasel, okay, guys? And speaking of this Weasel, it's the first of 3 appearances by this Weasel character in the Foghorn shorts, with the other 2 being Weasel Stop and Weasel While You Work. And yes, any other Weasel you see, it's another Weasel, okay? They seem to love their Weasels over at Looney Tunes Land, so there you are.
There's also the Weasels in, for example, in Looney Tunes issue 15, a Looney Tunes Merry Melodies comics, there's a Weasel who's actually looks a little bit more similar to the My Green Fedora Weasel. It's One Gun Weasel, that's his name, and he's against Cowboy Bugs Bunny.
All in all, they just loved using Weasels, and Bob McKimson always had a tendency to use a lot of animals in his shorts anyway, and mostly of Barnyard anyway.
I think this Weasel is like a precursor to the Tasmanian Devil.
Yeah, I could see it.
Because he's a snarling little animal. In the later ones, he's clearly willing to eat whatever. He's like a giant slobbery mess.
I could see it. Yeah, it could be that as a result of this, when it came time to do that Tasmanian Devil short, that McKimson decided to approach the character in the same way. So it's possible.
I have 2 other facts that I'd like to say. Now, this Weasel does not have a name. However, in a review from 1953, the Weasel's name is Wary Weasel. Now, I take this review as a grain of salt, but if you want to name something, I would choose the 1953 name. The other thing I was going to say is that often in theaters, this film ran with the crime wave, which is called a New Warner sensation starring Gene Nelson and Phyllis Kirk. And this is not the only Foghorn Leghorn title named Plop Goes the Weasel. In 1976, there is a Looney Tunes comic book, a Henry Hawk story, who tended to be the star of the Looney Tunes comic book. Completely different story, complete coincidence, no connection whatsoever. This Weasel, not the same Weasel, but it is still called Plop Goes Weasel, and it's still mainly starring Foghorn Leghorn and Henry Hawk.
Yeah, it's just one of those names, and look, speaking of names, I have to still mention this. I know it's obvious to maybe 99% of you guys watching, but I have to still mention it for the few that don't realize. But the title is a pun on the children's song Pop Goes the Weasel, and they even use that as the Weasel's theme all throughout this short. It's a public domain song, so why not, right? Yeah.
They use that song in a lot of cartoons, though. Like, they used it in Hillbilly Hair. The film buffs will know this more as the film that gets Curly Howard mad in Punch Drunk. If you play the Weasel tune, he gets mad. It can be an excellent box art.
Yes.
Now you're gonna bring the boys a food. Oh, you're the... You can't do that.
And it's what's considered by many to be the first quote-unquote true Three Stooges short, at least the formula that they would use from then on out, that they became incredibly popular after that one. And one other thing, and I'm not going to educate everyone on chicken breeds or anything, but when Foghorn mentions,
I know where there's a nice, big, fine-eating Red Island Road.
That's actually a take on the actual chicken breed, the Rhode Island Red. So you guys can learn about chicken breeds today. So there you are. This is a very educational channel. Maybe change the name Anthony's Chicken Breed Talk or something. I don't know. We'll change that. So in watching this short, I actually hadn't seen this before. I had the Collector's Choice, but since I knew this review was coming up, I didn't watch it on the Collector's Choice. I watched it now for the first time, and I thought this is pretty good. It's your standard Foghorn, Barnyard Dog plus third character short. But one thing that struck me most was the backgrounds. I noticed that McKimson's now starting to incorporate more and more of the simplified look, the 50s modern style look. It's not quite UPA or anything, but it's very simplified.
I think they're great. Ironically, I think that they're just simple barnyard backgrounds.
Yeah, you don't need to be overly detailed. It works fine. But what's interesting in terms of the backgrounds, after this one, you have Of Rice and Hen, and that one has even more stylized backgrounds. So it's good to see that even at this point, as the budgets are tightening, that McKimson's at least experimenting somewhat. And even in There Ought to Be a Law, which I really didn't like that one, but at least it looked amazing. It looked different. At least you could see McKimson trying stuff, which is always great. So I reckon we take a look at the short from start to finish. I do like how they open up. So you see the Weasel sign. I just like how they have to include Chicken Thief in there as though it's like, duh. Like, okay. I don't know, that amused me.
How many chicken thieves have Foghorn Leghorn faced now? Because there's Henry Hawk, but has he faced a different chicken thief than this?
Maybe a fox or something. I don't know. They're all after the chickens, and this is what McKimson was great at, making all these barnyard type situations. And sure enough, I'm sure he would have dealt with these situations in some way. We see Barnyard Dog, and a nice change of pace. We don't see him chained up like he usually is near his doghouse. He's actually marching. He's dedicated to his job. I like how, at least with these Foghorn shorts, that things do get changed up every so often. But the Foghorn said a line which absolutely cracked me up, and that was,
"That dog, I say that dog, strictly GI. Gibbering idiot, that is."
That got me. When I heard that, absolutely got me. I always love the Foghornisms. And yes, I'm well aware of that trend that's currently going around now with Foghorn going on and all sorts of different situations and memes. I'm aware of it.
For y'all listening in the future, is it a trend?
Because when I'm recording this, it still seems to be a trend where people are just putting Foghorn in all these memes. So, go figure. But hey, anything to bring Foghorn to the spotlight, I'm all for. I'm just not into the whole meme thing myself, but if it makes people happy, that's always a good thing.
I don't think Big Chungus has gone away.
No, and it probably never will. In any case, continuing on with this, I like this whole idea where Foghorn's like, you know what, I'm going to mess with the dog yet again.
I'm just going to throw out my own kind outside the fence.
Exactly. They could potentially get hurt or maimed or whatever, but nah, we got to mess with the dog, right? And I like that music cue. So when you see that the chicks have been released, we hear this interesting sped up version of Chicken Reel. I thought Carl Starling's choice was great, because you hear Chicken Reel always whenever you see, well, chickens.
Here's a whole mess of them, dog. Better round them up. Hey, cut that out.
And Foghorn just keeps on going and going and going, just really messing with him to the point where he ends up saying,
That, I say that dog's busier than a centipede at a toe counting contest.
Another chef's kiss Foghornism. And sure enough, we see this Weasel, and I have to say, I love this Weasel design. It's so deranged, animated to perfection. I think it's Scribner doing a lot of the animation of the Weasel, at least in most of the shots, and my goodness, it's just perfect. Just the deranged look, the deranged animation, and even the sound effects where he doesn't talk, he just does the whole yeah, and licks his lips.
Yeah. Which is a Tasmanian devil trait too, by the way, only saying like limited things.
Exactly. And he pretty much looks like me whenever I see a really nice hamburger, you know?
You might even say this is like a barnyard Tasmanian devil in a way.
Yes, and I love it. I absolutely love it.
McKimson loved to use obscure animals. Jones did too, to an extent too, but you wouldn't see as many obscure animals in Freeling shorts as you would like in a Jones or a McKimson short. Jones had the Roadrunner and the Coyote, but then sheepdogs and all that, but McKimson was using Tasmanian devils and kangaroos, and I guess they're obscure here, Anthony.
Yeah, the dog, when he's walking over with all the chicks, he can't open the door, so then he hands them to the Weasel, not realizing it's the Weasel, and then the dog just getting all shocked, like, what have I done? You know, that's a great shot right there, and if it is indeed Scribner, it shows that, yes, he's not as restrained in this short like he is in some of the shorts under McKimson. But the Weasel, it sounds weird. Whenever the Weasel gets kicked around or whatever, it sounds like a dog for some reason. The whole yape, yape, yape. I thought that was a weird little touch there. But hey, it definitely works, I would think.
Drop that!
So, I like how Foghorn, he continues to mess with the dog, but the dog actually gets a win here. So he messes with the dog saying, hey, what am I doing out here? Just being an absolute dick to this dog, right? So
Yeah.
the dog ends up going, all right, I'll put you back. So he just squeezes him through that hole.
What am I doing on the outside of the fence? I belong on the inside. I demand you put me back where I belong. Dog. All right. I'll put you back.
I was actually expecting him to make a joke about his feathers being numbered.
Yeah, it's like, it's cold here and all that. So, a little gag,
Yeah.
but still, it works out pretty well. So we get the whole thing now where the Foghorn notices the Weasel, even though the Weasel should technically be his enemy, but whatever, you just go with it.
So should the chicken hawk, but
Yeah,
the Weasel is clearly stupid.
in this one, yes. Definitely. Because sure enough, as one would predict, the Foghorn has this plan to make the dog look like that Red Island Road, as he says.
Versus in Weasel While You Work, he's literally just casually willing to eat a dog.
So he gets the dog that's been forced to be disguised like a chicken, basically, and it's just his leg through, and that dog getting his fur ripped off, that's gotta be really painful. And when I was looking at that, I was going, ooh, yeah, that's got to be pretty painful. And not to mention, the animation of the dog in pain is fantastic as well. I think that's scripted too. But I like how before that, when Foghorn puts all the feathers and stuff onto the dog, he even has that chef's triangle, come and get it. He just happens to have that, which is excellent. Mm-hmm. Excellent, of course.
1, 2, 3.
So we get to the final act, and sure enough, we all know that the dog's going to now get his revenge against Foghorn in some way. So once again, the deranged Weasel animation, fantastic. Probably the highlight of this short, in my opinion. And the Weasel ends up hitting Foghorn with a mallet, and Foghorn is now accused of being intoxicated. I thought that was funny.
Yeah.
Intoxicated. Oh, that's ridiculous. I'm a teetotaler. Yeah, I'll never touch a stuff, boy. Yeah, that's what they all say. Come on, let's see you walk this straight line.
I agree, that was funny.
Yeah, and says, okay, shame on you for being intoxicated. He's being reprimanded by the dog.
He's like, who can walk a straight line?
Yes, and the animation of Foghorn trying to walk that straight line, just fantastic.
Perfectly absurd. Why, there's nothing to walk. I say there's nothing to walk in a straight line. Boy, why, anybody can walk straight.
And sure enough, the Weasel then starts cooking the Foghorn foot. You would think that he would at least try and maybe off him first, but whatever. It's kind of like boiling lobsters alive.
He's not very smart.
Yeah, exactly. And we get the ending, which, okay, I could see the punchline coming, but it's still funny anyway with the whole thing. I can't stand to hear the schnook suffer, and he just gets earmuffs and just continues doing his job, and we end right there.
Which, I love the classic cartoon logic that earmuffs work that well.
Exactly. I mean, I work at an airport, very loud place, and I have heavy-duty earmuffs, and sure enough, even that doesn't block out all sound. But whatever, it works as a punchline. And now my good friend Luke Perkins has a few thoughts on this short, so take it away, Luke.
All right. School is finally over for me by the time I'm recording this, so now I can take the time and talk about another great Looney Tunes cartoon. This time from director Robert McKimson, starring Foghorn Leghorn and the Barnyard Dog. I'm actually a big fan of the Foghorn cartoons. I think they're a lot of fun and there's a really great dynamic between Foghorn and the Barnyard Dog. Because it's not that a protagonist always conquers the antagonist on it, it's just that sometimes Foghorn will win against the Barnyard Dog, or sometimes Barnyard Dog would win against Foghorn, and then sometimes there's a third character that would sort of win against both of them, or sometimes win against one character. It also helps that by the time I'm recording this, Foghorn Leghorn has recently became an overnight internet sensation and huge meme where he will pop up onto other media or anime and would just straight up yell at the protagonist for not doing the right thing, being like the audience who is just like, why isn't the main character doing the right thing, you know? A friend of mine, Manny Cruiser, the Toonie Tender, might recognize this meme because there's one example where Foghorn basically takes a role for Uncle Iroh from Avatar and yelling at Zuko in that particular scene. That meme of Foghorn and Avatar specifically is by Dylan Roca or Bird Comic Studios on Twitter and Instagram. He is an amazing artist. Go check him out. He's awesome. And literally just recently, a scene from The Great Piggy Bank Robbery, a Daffy Duck and Bob Clampett cartoon, also became a meme, particularly of the Rogues Gallery scene with Neon Noodle and Snake Eyes and 88 Teeth and others. And it goes to show just how beloved and timeless these Looney Tunes cartoons and characters are, even if Warner Brothers doesn't actually want to admit it. Coyote versus Acme. But we're not talking about memes right now. We are talking about this cartoon. Now, rewatching this cartoon recently was very interesting because I noticed a change in the Foghorn Barnyard Dog dynamic. In cartoons before this one, Barnyard Dog is usually just a dog around with his own business, sometimes sleeping and sometimes just wanting to screw with Foghorn. And you're usually introduced to the Barnyard Dog in his doghouse. But this one takes a sort of a different approach, where Barnyard Dog is actually guarding the hen house this time. Even in earlier cartoons like The Foghorn Leghorn from 1948, when there's this chicken hawk catching chickens, it's like Foghorn being the one to stop the chicken hawk, sort of being like the rooster, the main leader of his house. And this one has Foghorn Leghorn being the one inside the hen house, but he's still constantly screwing with the dog, where the Foghorn is taking baby chicks and throwing them out of the fence to make the dog look like he's doing a bad job, when in reality he's just bored and screwing with him. It's an interesting take on their dynamic. Now we come to the real star of the show, the Weasel. That Weasel has no thoughts. He is just gluttonous and constantly smacking his lips every time he sees his victim, and wastes no time at all trying to catch them or even basically cook them. And you also have the iconic voice of his, provided by Mel Blanc as usual, with the whole yeah. I don't think I can do the voice very well. I do really like this cartoon. It's fun and I like the Weasel, but there aren't any particular standout moments that I could think of in this one, other than, you know, the twist on the dynamic in any moment with the Weasel. But I do remember this one part of the cartoon, and this got a huge laugh out of me on my rewatch, where Foghorn is like outside of the hen house and he's like, "You better put me back where I belong." And the Barnyard Dog is like, "Okay, fine." And then he tries pushing his whole body into this hole that's on the fence, and Foghorn is stuck, of course. And then Barnyard Dog is just violently pushing Foghorn's butt with a stick for him to get back inside of the hen house. And it was just like a boom, 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 boom. It's just really funny to me. It's a violent but really funny gag that fits this cartoon series, but it also just completely caught me off guard here, because some of the violence that you come to know from these Foghorn cartoons is rather restrained in this cartoon compared to other Foghorn cartoons, and the restraint on violence would also become common once Robert McKimson's cartoons sort of became toned down and other things. I do also remember that this cartoon specifically was subtly remade as a weaseling in from the Looney Tunes cartoons revival from the early 2020s on HBO Max. The plot in that one is similar to it, and it even has a similar ending punchline, but the motivations are a bit more different in this one, where Foghorn Leghorn is just really bitter and jealous that the Barnyard Dog is doing a better job at guarding the chickens, as the 160 Weasel free day record implies, and he's doing a better job at guarding the chickens than a rooster, and Foghorn is trying to stop that record. It's an interesting cartoon. But yeah, I'd give this cartoon a 7.5 or 8 out of 10. There's not any particular standout moments in this one other than what I just mentioned with the whole fence thing and the Weasel, but It's a pretty fun Foghorn Leghorn cartoon and a very easy watch, and sometimes that's all what you really need. And thankfully the Weasel here isn't really a one-shot, and you'll actually get to see him in a few later cartoons. One of them had 2 particular memes for 2 different reasons, but again, we will get to that when we get to that. Anyways, that's all folks, see ya later.
So as for a rating, this one, it's your middle of the road Foghorn, sure, but I'm not saying that like it's a bad thing. These are quite fun, and I maintain that even when McKimson towards the end had the worst budgets of all the different teams there, and the lesser animators and so on, he still cranked out some great Foghorn shorts, at least in my opinion. And this one gets, 8.5 out of 10. It's fine for what it is. I think it's funny. It's good. You'll probably rate this 10 out of 10, I would imagine, Camden.
For this case, I will, because I think it's a good short.
Yeah.
And again, once you force me to do Sugar and Spies, like you've already said you're going to force me to do, then we'll talk poor ratings from me.
I'm going to put you to the test on that one. But in any case, that'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching, guys. And until next time, take care.
Oh, I can't stand to hear the big schnook suffering like that. Yow! Ah, that's better.